take.
I'll call the order for the City Council regular meeting for August 1st, 2005. We please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll have roll call, please.
Arbogast.
Here.
Garnos.
Here.
Gisselbeck.
Here.
Heller.
Here.
Johnson. Here. Meisenheimer. Here. Solberg. Here. Walder.
Here.
Wilson.
Here.
And York.
Here.
Thank you.
Next, we have a motion to approve the minutes of the City Council meeting held on July the 18th, 2005.
So moved.
So moved by Wilson, second by Dennis Solberg. Any corrections or additions to those minutes? If not, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Tracy will address us to the liquor transfers, license transfers. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll have a presentation by the Sisseton and Wahpeton Oyate Sioux tribal representatives. Barry, you'll speak to that, or? Sure. Okay.
Mayor Fox, members of the City Council, it's my pleasure to introduce the tribal chairman for the Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate, J.C. Crawford.
Mayor Fox and members of the City Council, is very honored to be able to give a short presentation to you here this evening. And I want to first of all thank you for this opportunity, but also congratulate you, Mr. Fox, Mr. Mayor, for winning this position, and any other new members that may have came aboard to participate of our public servant duties to represent different other people in our government and our municipalities. Tonight, I want to share with you two things: a presentation. As you may be aware of, we're asking for support to our gaming compact with the state of South Dakota. We do have a letter from the previous administration or mayor, but Mayor Fox, we would like to have your endorsement to have it more concurrent with it. We're not only coming tonight to ask for that support for that letter of our objectives, but we also want to share some time with you, some of the things that we're going through, so that as you talk to your constituents, that you have some kind of educated knowledge of what the compact negotiation and what that means for us at Sisseton Wahpeton, and as well as those things of Northeast South Dakota in our region. So if you can give us some opportunity, we appreciate that, to go through it. Barry's going to be the thumb man. He's going to push the buttons, and we'll go through it as we go. Our presentation is based upon a history of Indian gaming, the Dakota Nation Gaming Enterprise facilities. Our corporate structure is Dakota Nation Gaming Enterprise. Economic impact of Indian gaming on the Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate. Proposed expansion of gaming at Dakota Sioux and at Dakota Connection at Exit 232 in Sisseton. Economic impact of proposed expansion and compact negotiations. The purpose of the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act was in 1988 to promote tribal economic development, tribal self-sufficiency, and stronger tribal governments. With that, Indian Gaming Regulatory Act, as Act and overview, is three different classes of gaming. Class 1 is social games with minimal prizes. Class 2 is a bingo, including electronic bingo. And there'll be some significant about the including electronic bingo game. We can explain that down the road further on in the presentation. Class 3, all other forms of gaming, and generally referred to as a casino-style gaming, slot machines. Indian gaming in South Dakota, there's 8 of the 9 tribes have current gaming compacts. All are limited to 250 total machines, where one tribe had not made a threshold, so they only have 180 machines at this time. 3 tribes are currently negotiating new compacts. We have 3 facilities within our scope of Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate. Being the first, Dakota Magic is we have a compact with the state of North Dakota as well, and the Dakota Magic represents that. It's located at I-29 at the North Dakota-South Dakota state line. At that facility, we operate 700 slot machines, an event center, 125-room hotel, 2 restaurants, a convenience store, and an 18-hole golf course at that facility. Here are some pictures of some of our rooms that we have, if you haven't been there. One of the pictures of our suites that we are also, these types of rooms that we're showing you are going to be replicable to some degree to that at the Dakota Sioux project as well. That will be open September 1st. Dakota Connection is located at Sisseton Exit 232. We have 50 slot machines, convenience store, bingo, restaurant, and now an enduro racetrack there currently, just not open. The facility that we're enhancing here at Watertown is the Dakota Sioux Casino. We currently operate 200 slot machines, restaurant, convenience store, and a 93-room hotel, which will be open in September. Here's some pictures of the current facility. Things are going well for us. We'll very openly meet our deadline of September. And I wanted to get into now some of the economic impact report of these facilities with the rest of the presentation. Economic impact of a current gaming operation and employment of 826 employees of all 3 facilities, which 653 live in South Dakota. Our annual payroll is $15.9 million. The benefits is $3.2 million. Total goods and service purchase is $25.4 million, which South Dakota vendors receive $7.7 million.
I'd like to add that there are 121 of those employees who live in the city of Watertown, just for the city council's information.
Okay. Economic impact of current gaming operations on System Wapton Oyate: increased tribal employment, reduced unemployment, reduced poverty rates, increased educational attainment, and new and expanded tribal programs. Currently, DNGE is tribal to non-tribal employment. We have 45% of our employees are non-tribal members, and we have a 55% tribal member employment rate. Our tribal employment rate for 1995, Barry, you may want to help me on this one.
The tribal unemployment rate in 1995 was 59.5%. 1995 is the year we used as a baseline year because that's the year that Class 3 gaming was first introduced to this area by the Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate. You can see that by 1993, the unemployment rate had gone from 59.5 to 30.7%. So unemployment since Class 3 gaming has been in our area amongst tribal members has been cut in half. However, you can see that the bottom line is 3.6% is the current unemployment rate for all of South Dakota. So the Oyate still have a significant ways to go. Their unemployment rate is still almost 9 times as high as the state average, which is one of the reasons why we really need those additional 500 machines.
Okay, thank you, Barry. The Northeast South Dakota poverty rate, as you can see in the chart, is with county to county is 1.2. Roberts County, where we have 40% of Native Americans, the population in Roberts County, which 30% of the population of Sisseton is Native American. Day County 4.3, Grant County 1.6, Marshall County 3.2, and the state of South Dakota 1.9. Barry, did you want to add any more comments on that?
The counties that have seen the largest decrease in poverty rate have been the counties with the highest Native American population base. Roberts County, as JC said, has a 40% population base of tribal members, and they saw almost a 5% decrease in the poverty rate since Class 3 gaming started in this area. In education attainment, the same thing. We've seen improvement across the board in tribal member education attainment since the onset of Class 3 gaming.
Some of the benefits that we take from our profitability from the three facilities over the past few years is that the Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate programs funding by gaming funds, or the tribal housing program, is where we put in $1.2 million in a first home buyers program to system in the past few years of 161 home purchase with an $8.8 million total value. Our recent housing initiative that we went over last Wednesday and Thursday is that our new numbers, sorry Barry, but it went to 172 new homes now since they're in the resistance of that, so we're increasing it every year. $938,000 and it has gone to the Sisseton Wahpeton Tribal College. We have a new facility there with a VOCAD program that we wanted, where we can build those homes in that process as well, to give the construction work skills to the members and to people that want to go to school there. And they're leveraging an additional that fund was able to allow them to leverage another $5.6 million in matching grants with people like the USDA Rural Development and other facilities. And the total economic impact of those dollars in our area is $13,695,000 in fiscal year 2005 and 05. The System of Optimal, I think, funded the other ones is a professional empowerment program. This was a program that was started within the gaming facility itself and to maintain employment levels. Our initial goal as an ordinance from the Oyate is that we have a Tribal and Employment Rights Office where our goal is to maintain 70% of tribal employment. Well, that professional empowerment program started at the casino and it was very successful. So now we have that as a global program for across the board to help keep our tribal members employed and others as well. We're also looking at some of the barriers for employment in-house daycare. The casinos with funds are going to have an in-house daycare so that they can help at the 24/7 jobs, 24 hours a day daycare program. We have a career path and college course program where we have in our management positions. We are very grateful that with that program we have 85% of our tribal members in management positions, so that we have a long-term management skills to run our program, our gaming. The drug and alcohol treatment program at Dakota Pride, we also with that program include a Gambler Anonymous, like an AA program. They can go there and visit about gaming problems. They can also go to that Dakota Pride and do that, as well as a responsible gaming program, as you see there. Our Tribal Economic Development Program, we allocate annually to 7 of our districts, $125,000 to each district each year for economic diversification plans within the small districts. Economic impact of a proposed expanded gaming of 500 additional machines, benefits to the state of South Dakota, benefits to the people of Northeast South Dakota, benefits to the Assistant Wapiti Oyate, and everyone's benefit. We're going to explain some of that. As you see it as the proposed plan, we are, like I said, we opening up the first 93 rooms so at the Dakota Sioux Hotel. But this is the master plan of what we want to do at Dakota Sioux Casino expansion. This is a 2 or 3 phase process. It really all boils down to what.
Travis come up and go over it?
Travis, did you want to speak? Travis is our CEO. He may can do this better than I can, but Travis, if you can do that.
Yeah, this, like JC said, this diagram is our master plan, and you can see the hotel rooms in the front. Now, just the first section is what we are currently building. It's 93 rooms. In the master plan, there'll be a total of 200 hotel rooms at the site. You can see right behind the hotel is the indoor water park, and behind that, a 24-lane bowling alley. Over to the left-hand side, you see the gaming floor. And behind that, on the left, you'll see entertainment facility, where we'll be able to seat around 1,500 people. This is similar to what we have at Dakota Magic. It'll allow us to draw names such as Bill Cosby, Jeff Foxworthy. We just recently had Tony Bennett at the facility, Wayne Newton, some really big name entertainment. The phases that we're going to build initially, obviously, is the 93 hotel room, and then the gaming floor off to the front left. With the addition of 500 machines, we'll be able to make the entire master plan a reality within 5 years.
With the expansion of gaming with our compact negotiation, if we're successful at the numbers, these are some of the things that will be benefit to in our area. And as you may know, that to the articles we talked about, that we've asked and mirrored some of the benchmarks of the 2010 initiative that was outlined us in the Governor Rounds' 2010 initiative. Will increase the state gross product an annual increase of $18,664,000. Will increase the sales tax, state sales tax of $145,000 to net. Increase in the South Dakota tourism of 223,598 new tours of visitors from out of state and reduce gaming leakage to the surrounding states. Casino competition. This is all again. Some of these are part of the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act concept with the tribes in Minnesota as well. Granite Falls has 600 machines. Morton, Minnesota has 1,650 machines. Manhoman Shooting Star Casino up there in northern Minnesota has 1,381 machines. Largest casinos in the eastern part of the state of Minnesota is 500 to 3,000 machines. The Riverboat Gaming Operations in northwestern Iowa has 1,545 devices. Knowing that we right now are limited to 250 devices, so those are kind of as tribes, that's what we need to, we're competing against from out of state. Economic impact of expanded gaming benefits to Watertown. The increased employment of 571 new employees, or 344 within Dakota Nation Gaming Enterprise, as Travis has outlined to you in our master plan. And there's 227 jobs, indirect and introduced jobs from that. Our goal is to meet a quality of jobs. The Dakota Nation Gaming Enterprise offers a benefit package as well. I want to maybe mention here is that, as you may read in the articles, that our average income jobs are $25,000, and we have a $5,000 benefit package that goes with that. So we have about a $30,000 annual benefit and employment package for those quality jobs, full FTEs. Capital investment at Dakota Sioux Casino expansion is about a $17 million proposal. We have 223,589 tourism annually, and more than 12,000 rooms nightly for Watertown Hotel.
I just want to add that 12,000 room nights for Watertown. That's what we anticipate as that will be spillover from the hotel at the casino if we get the 500 machines. We anticipate we'll add over 12,000 room nights to Watertown's hotels and motels.
Okay. Entertainment values of expanded gaming benefits to Watertown. As Travis was saying, entertainment value of big name acts. Currently 16 big names acts annually at Dakota Magic Casino. One thing I want to add there as we go through this slide is that the Dakota Magic Entertainment Center was we had to remodel that to fit the way it is. It was a temporary facility, so we had it in the pole barn concept. The entertainment center that we'll see at Dakota Sioux will actually be built for entertainment. So those things that we've learned from Dakota Magic, we believe Watertown will have a better entertainment facility because we know the ins and outs or the do's and don'ts on that as well. The indoor water park is something that we need to add to for overnight stay and weekend stay. The 24-lane bowling alley, JC likes to bowl, so that's one of my pet peeves that they gave me. So they're patronizing me somehow. Economic impact of expanded gaming benefits to the system of Wahpeton Oyate, expanded tribal employment opportunities for our members. Dakota History and Culture Center that we are also planning for is another term at the exit 232 by Sisseton, and expand the economic development programs that we have within our tribe and expand social programs with our fundings. Compact negotiation currently with Governor Rounds concerns, there are 3 of them: equal treatment of all tribes. Constitution says that limited gaming is permitted, and the potential impact to video lottery. And Governor Rounds on our responses is equal treatment of all tribes. We're saying that equal treatment does not mean equal number of machines. Why we say that is an explanation is that as I traveled too many times to Washington, D.C., as we travel from Fargo to Minneapolis, you can see the transition of mid-central Minnesota coming towards South Dakota and North Dakota. And we feel that we're going to have an opportunity in 10 years to 20 years from now to welcome that new population base. So we feel that our eastern tribes like Flanju and Yankton and Sisseton Wahpeton has an opportunity down the road to expand that entertainment to them. So we want to have a long-term plan with that. Equal standards for expanded gaming. And Klaus Robertson says that 500 additional machines is ideal for our market, as for the reason I just spoke earlier to number 1. Governor's concerns are our responses. As Constitution says, limited gaming is permitted. Video lottery is unlimited. It's 1,400 locations with 8,300 machines in statewide. Deadwood is unlimited, 30 per building, unlimited number of buildings. Indian gaming is limited. We have 2 locations for Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate, in South Dakota, and we have 250 Class 3 machines currently. We're requesting for the 500 additional machines, and we are limited gaming when you compare it to the other numbers. Governor concerns as well as potential impact of video lottery of the additional 500 machines for the state. State study shows or says that they're going to have a loss of $1.3 million in state sales tax. Klaus Robertson study, as we went through our impact study, that with the other expansion of the new machines, other machines that we'll do, is that will be $520,000 sales tax from new jobs, and there'll be $925,000 sales tax from new tourism. With the 500 machines, with those numbers, there will be a net of $145,000 net gain to the state in sales tax. And we're not. Those are some conservative numbers that we talked about, and it's not really all of the multiplier effect hasn't been included in that as well. Support of the expansion. Previously, we have asked the county commissioners for their support for this. We've asked recently, as 2 weeks ago, for Roberts County's commissioner support. We've asked the Watertown Chamber of Commerce, Focus Watertown, and Watertown Mayor Barger on behalf of Watertown, and over 50 businesses in northeast South Dakota. I really have to say something with the latter part of the 50 businesses in South Dakota. Those letters did get to the chief of staff's desk and to the governor, and they were really encouraged by the cooperation as we're working together to look and to educate what it means to us. And so those 50 letters did mean something to us, and obviously your letter too, Mr. Fox. If we can get that from your support, was that would help us as we go along. It's a win-win situation. The states wins, northeast South Dakota wins, and the system Wampanoag win. It's something that we have a number of things that we wanted to do, Mayor. We want to see the economic impact. We want to share those information with you. I know it's kind of a fast presentation, and I'll be honest with you, I apologize for the unprofessionals because Barry just gave it to me this morning. We were supposed to have met last Thursday, but our schedules got conflicted, and so I seen it first time today. But some of the data, and if you had any questions to any part of this presentation, this is the last one, right?
Yes.
Okay, I have to get to know. But if you have any questions about the presentation, I'll be more than willing to answer them. We have Travis here, or Barry, or we have our attorney. What is his name? Pete Jones. Just got to give him some grief. If you have any questions from any of you, we'll be more than willing to ask those questions. But Mayor, we wanted to bring this information to you, to the body. We want to thank the previous members. There are the members here that supported us in the letter previously, but with you as a new mayor and new leader for the system for Watertown, we're asking that we have a letter with your signature and support from the city council.
Thank you very much for the presentation, JC. Does the council have any questions or concerns they'd like to address now?
Well, I think your efforts are commendable, and I would make a motion for us to consider that that we offer our support to your efforts and send a letter to the governor indicating our backing of your efforts and urge him to continue on with the negotiations.
So we have
And I'll second that.
okay, thank you. We have a motion by Mr. Johnson and seconded by Mrs. York to support this project with a letter to the governor. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. We will be doing that soon.
Well, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Next, Tracy.
Item number 3 on the. Okay, item number 3 on the agenda is the application for transfer of a retail on-off sale malt beverage license for Kings and Queens Casino, owned by TKC Incorporated, that is currently an inactive license, to Roger Meyer, who will also be holding that at least for the time being, as an inactive license. Mayor, the first order of business is to conduct a public hearing.
Thank you, Tracy. I will open up the floor for the public hearing on the transfer of this inactive license. Is there anyone here to speak to that issue? If not, we'll close the public hearing and we'll ask for council action. Is there a motion to allow the transfer?
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Johnston, seconded.
Second it.
Seconded by Mrs. Walder. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Tracy, you'll have next.
Item number 4 is consideration of an application for transfer of a retail on-off sale malt beverage license from Julie Lacqua, and that license is also currently inactive, to Eric West, who will also be holding that as an inactive license for the time being. Again, the first order of business is a public hearing.
Thank you, Tracy. We'll have a public hearing now on the transfer of this inactive license from Julia Lacqua to Eric West. Is there anyone to speak to that issue on the public hearing? If not, we'll close the public hearing and ask for a motion to approve this transfer.
I'll make a motion to approve the transfer.
Motion by Mrs. York, seconded. Seconded by Mr. Solberg. Any further discussion?
Just a question, Tracy. How long can they remain inactive?
Any one owner can maintain a license in an inactive status for up to 2 years. And that's the reason, as I understand it, that Julie Lacqua is transferring this. Her 2 years are essentially up, and so it needs to be either put into an active status in another location, or transferred to another owner, or forfeited. Those are basically her alternatives at this time, and as you can see, she's transferring it to a new
And
owner.
even though those licenses are inactive, does the yearly fee go on?
Yes.
Okay, any other questions? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
And item number 5 is the renewal of the license involved in the agenda item that you just approved, is renewing that malt beverage license in the name of Eric West in an inactive status.
We'll open the meeting for a public hearing on that malt beverage license for on-off sale for, it's an inactive license for Eric West. Does anyone wish to speak to that issue? If not, we'll close the public hearing and ask for a motion for this renewal.
So move.
So moved by Mrs. Walder, seconded.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Meisenheimer. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Mr. Doug Dahl, our fire chief, will speak to us on the ambulance bids.
Yes, good evening. In the packet, you'll see the tabulation of the bids that we received for our new ambulance. We received 3 bids, and the wheeled coach out of South St. Paul, Minnesota, came in with a bid of $89,382. And if there's any discussion or questions on that, I would ask that you would accept that bid.
So moved by Mr. Garnos, seconded. Seconded by Mr. Giselbeck. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Next, we'll have our state's attorney, Vince Foley, address us on the open meeting laws, which will require no action on our part tonight.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. Some familiar faces, new cameras, new technology, the same table that the council gets to sit at. As you may be aware, the issue of the open meetings laws, how they apply, is in the news quite regularly. Attorney General Long commissioned a task force to study the issue, and part of what they came up with was a body called the Open Meeting Commission that I serve on. I'm not here to talk about how that process works, but rather just to touch on the issue of the open meetings rules and how they apply. This is a good forum for me to do that, to speak to the city council, which frankly isn't a body that state's attorney gets too concerned about, because you have professional staff that are here every meeting to guide you. But it also allows me to address the issues in a summary context. And I will be relatively brief. That's remarkable for a lawyer. But the issues are very straightforward, and I'll touch on the main precepts of the Open Meetings Law. And they are, first, the issue of notice, and second, there are some times when things really get moving quickly, and so you need to have quick notice or emergency actions. And then finally, those types of issues that the law allows to be held in executive session. Now, I always get somewhat of a chuckle out of different candidates who say, if I'm elected, we're going to run government like a business. And I know there's more to it than the issue of open meetings, but with my perspective, that part of it I find rather humorous, because those of you who may be involved in a private business know it's exactly that. It's private, and the only thing that becomes public record is something that the law allows. If it's a corporation, you simply have your articles of incorporation that you file and your officers and names of shareholders in a closely held corporation. That's it. If it's a publicly held corporation, there's a bit more. SEC requirements require more, but even so, strategic decisions can be made within the context of a private meeting. Well, in the context of government, that's not how it works. And South Dakota is one of the forerunners with our sunshine laws in recognizing that. And part of that is something that you're all familiar with, is your agenda. It is the notice to the public that this is what city government is going to be dealing with. And state law is very specific that items need to be agendized before official action can be taken. Now, for instance, there are oftentimes reports that you'll hear given. Like, for instance, Fire Chief Dahl may have talked about a particular fire in just a reporting sense. That's not something that needs to be agendized. It's just reporting. But the approval of the ambulance purchase, that's official action, so it needed to be agendized, and it was. But this being a entity where things are always changing, things are always happening at the last minute, the law does allow in certain circumstances for things to be added on an open agenda in a relatively quick time period of 24 hours notice. That statute is very specific, and it requires notice to be given to interested parties and to the press to make sure that the issue is out there for people to discuss. That's the gist of the notice requirements. Very straightforward. If it's official action that needs to be taken, it's official action that needs to be noticed. A lot of times you'll hear about governments that might have taken official action without items being agendized. The risk that they run is that official action may be void, not something that has any legal effect. So they may have approved a contract and signed the contract, but that contract may be void and may cause all kinds of legal ramifications. And so the risk that governments run is that some of their actions that they may have taken may not stand. But also, the entities that deal with you run a risk if they don't make sure that the government follows the laws and allows for the official action. Those are the items that are relatively straightforward, and there's very little that goes on in the way of discussion, argument. the real gist of any argument on the open meetings law always seems to revolve around executive session. State law is very specific. It lays out the exceptions for which executive session is allowed to take place. Inevitably, there's a suspicion that occurs when a public entity says, okay, now we're going to go and we're going to talk in private. And that suspicion is sometimes founded and sometimes not. And then sometimes in an executive session, things are done that justify that suspicion. And those things that are done are either done intentionally or unintentionally. If you happen to read the 3 decisions that the Open Meetings Commission handed down within the last 2 months, those are some good examples of what actually happened once entities went into executive session. The Gregory School District went into executive session, and the superintendent pulled out of a stack of papers a letter that he had received from the Burke School District wanting to talk about consolidation. Well, consolidation is not an executive session material, and they just casually started talking about it. That was a violation. Now, to Gregory School District's credit, they admitted that. They admitted it again, and then they came to the Open Meetings Commission, and they admitted it again and apologized. So it's those kinds of inadvertent things can happen. We've all found ourselves in conversations where we might stray from the issue that we're supposed to be talking about. That happened with the city of Mitchell. They were working on a study on their jail, and they had a task force study it. I said city of Mitchell, I'm sorry, it was the Davison County Commission. And they had a task force report, and they went into executive session to talk about that task force report because there were some personnel items in there. They were embarrassing to some of the employees, and so they didn't want to have that type of information discussed in public. Well, the problem that they ran into was the task force report was broader than just the personnel issues, and they talked about all of the task force report in the executive session. They should have confined themselves to those personnel issues and then come back out and talked about the task force report in general. Those types of inadvertent, good faith, or perhaps ignorant is too strong of a term, but making a poor choice and to discuss broadly are usually the types of things that we find as violations of executive sessions. And so it's important when you consider the executive session material that you consider the motion that was made. The basis is stated for the subject, and confine your discussions to that. And it's not something that I'm concerned about. I just simply mentioned to Tracy in an email, I guess I wrote it, but it's an email conversation that I suggested that perhaps if the council was interested, I could come and address that and answer any questions that you might have. It seems to be an issue that's ripe in the press and something that was important for a lot of people. A lot of people put a lot of time into the consideration of the law and wanted to take this opportunity. I would stand for any questions if there are any.
Just a comment, and that is that you previously and Tracy, and now Stanton and Tracy, rarely gave us an opportunity to get anywhere off key here. The hook was pretty quick all the time. So, I mean, we've got good staff, and they are alert to making sure that the conversation is confined to our issues, and we try really hard to keep it that way.
Yeah, and I recognize that, and it's it's part of the paradox of speaking here. I mean, I know I'm preaching to the saved. I mean, we have Brad and Gordy on the city council, former press members, so it's not something that I've received complaints about. It's just an opportunity to address the public, address the forum, and spread the gospel of the open meetings.
Vince, one of the questions I have, you mentioned the open in the agenda, and theoretically, at least the way I understand it from what you just said, unless that open part of the agenda has been notified to the press and to whoever else wants to know about it, in effect, we can't do anything under the open part of the agenda. Explain that to me, will you?
Official action. You can't do any official action under the open agenda unless you have provided that notice. You can discuss other items that are not official action items in a public meeting, subject to your rules of how they are brought up. Every board can control how extraneous items are brought up, but no valid action can be taken on an action item unless it's put in on that 24-hour period.
Okay, but we all know that whoever brings up things under the open part of the agenda, and we do take action on and have, and that's the first time I'd ever heard that we couldn't do that.
Okay. Well, I mean that's you know, I would defer to the record and how those things were brought up, but that's, you know, any official action, any official item that you're going to take
Well,
needs to be
Vince,
agendized.
Vince, official action would be even on emergency items, and we do allow emergency items. For instance, if the air conditioning went out of this building and we had to discuss that at the meeting tonight, we might take the official action to make a major purchase and fix the air conditioning. That's an official action, is it not? And it hasn't been on the agenda because it maybe just broke down at 4:30 this afternoon.
I'm comfortable.
I hope it didn't, but
I'm comfortable that you would get proper advice in how to purchase that air conditioner.
Stanton's giving me the nod that yes, we would.
No, yeah, it's presumptions on how you might get it done, but the notice provisions would go out. Frankly, I'm trying to think of. There was an instance back when I was city attorney when near the end where we had to call a hurry-up meeting because we had to do a purchase, and it was the only item. I can't remember what it was, but it was an odd time of the week, an odd time of the day, but we needed to do that process. And so that, you know, if it was depending upon the size of the purchase, would require that notice.
Vince, one more thing. This might be what you used to refer to as a softball, but what are the, remember the softballs?
Yes.
What are the accepted items for going into executive session? Could you list those for us?
No, I can't off the top of my head.
I know one is to discuss personnel issues,
Personnel issues, contracts.
contracts and negotiations.
Yes. Those are the only two I'm comfortable saying off the top of my head without
Okay.
having the statute book in front of me.
Pending and threatened
Thank you.
litigation. If there's pending or threatened
Okay.
litigation against the city, we can go into to discuss that. I can advise you about what that is. Personnel matters, negotiations, labor type negotiation, contractual issues with the city, or if there's any pending or threatened litigation against the city, I can advise you of those things in executive session.
But since the city never gets sued. Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Excuse me, Vince, one more question.
sorry.
So on this
Yes,
open, on tonight, we can certainly hear reports, but we are not allowed to take any motions or seconds or any action on any.
You can take motions in seconds if they're not actions of official business. For instance, you might say, we want to have the horned toad approved as the official amphibian of the city of Watertown. That's not really an official action, and so you could take a motion and a second on that. But, and you can take reports and you can take discussion, but the official action is what you can't. For instance, purchasing, if there was, let's use the ambulance as the example, follow up on Alderwoman York's comment. Let's say the accident happened at 4:30 this afternoon and it was a total. I think it might have been an ambulance issue. Now that I think back on one of the quick issues that we had to move on, you could not come in here at this meeting and approve the purchase of an ambulance being it over the bid limit. You would need to provide notice and have the meeting tomorrow.
Thank you, Vince.
Thank you.
Next, we'll have Mr. Mullen speak to us on the architecture's report of the library remodeling and expansion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. This evening I have with me Mr. Mark Ospas from Architecture Incorporated out of Sioux Falls. And Mark is going to be making a presentation to you on the end of Phase 1 for library expansion. Just as a reminder, basically for the public, Phase 1 is the conceptual time of design. The next phase, Phase 2, would be the actual building design, if that's the way you folks want to go with it, because the contract that we have with Architecture Inc. allows the city some times to get out of the contract. Tonight is one of those opportunities. Okay, I'm not encouraging you to do that, by the way. But we are at the end of Phase 1. We're going to ask you, once Mark's through, to take some official action and say, yes, proceed to Phase 2. Okay. So with that, I'm going to ask Mark Ospas to come up here, and then I'll just sit back and watch along with the rest of you.
Thank you, Mike. Good evening. I have enjoyed thus far the process of programming and design of the library addition. The library staff and board and department heads here at the city have been involved throughout the process, and I think we've arrived at a very good conceptual design. I think it's is respectful of the site, and I think it is very functional, and we've had a lot of fun along the way as well. I have handouts of what I'm going to show you tonight so that I can leave them with you to study in further depth. Basically, you all know where the library is, just north of Brune Avenue. And looking at this site plan, the existing building is outlined in a small red line. You can see a square superimposed over the building. The existing library is, I think to your advantage and our advantage, was designed on a grid, about a 22.5-foot grid system, whereby every 22.5 feet in both directions you have a column, and there are beams connecting those columns, and the roof structure rests on top of those beams. This will allow us to remove exterior walls without disrupting the structure in a severe fashion. And I think that's important to note, that whether it was by design or by accident, this is a good thing. When you look at that square on the site, you look in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see a kind of a light violet colored room. That's the existing mechanical room. And that is about the only thing in the existing building that is going to stay where it is. You can see that we've added 3 bays to the north, and 1 bay to the east, and 1 bay to the south. We had a number of different site studies. I think there were 5 or 6 of them, looking at where we should put the entrances, where the parking should be, what should the setbacks be. We went through the zoning ordinances, we had meetings with city staff, and we basically decided to go with this option that leaves the existing parking lot on the west side and expands it further to the north, adds a parking lot half the width of the existing one to the east, and leaves the parking on Brune Avenue to the south. Now, by adding this parking to the east and expanding the parking to the west, it was our decision jointly to provide 2 new entrances, one on the west and one on the east. And you'll see when we get into the floor plan how this works. But that means now that there will not be an entrance on the south. And we're going to suggest to you that we provide a sculpture court for the sculpture that will be donated in that area in a very visible spot. You can also see on the plan, the site plan here, the yellow cross through the building. These are the major thoroughfares throughout the building. In other words, from the entrances on the east and west, and to the north, where there will be glassed-in reading rooms, and to the south, where you'll be able to look through glass out to that sculpture courtyard. These are the major thoroughfares and the major orientation generating elements of the building. And as you can imagine, the circulation desk is at the very center or crossroads of those two circulation paths. The setback limits for setting the size of our addition was one element, and we're keeping in line with city ordinances. And the other one was the amount of parking that we could generate. We did there isn't really a formula in the city's zoning ordinance that says a library needs so many parking stalls for so many square feet. So what we did was we took different types of occupancies for meeting rooms, stack space, office space, etc. And we used sort of rule of thumb figures on how many people could be in those spaces. Once we got the occupant load of the building, we generated our parking count. We have 77 parking stalls shown here right now, and we think that that will be adequate for the building as designed. The larger plan of the building shows our main entrance to the west, which is left on the drawing, and our other entrance to the right, or the east side. Those hallways, or thoroughfares, if you will be scattered with display areas, with seating, and with opportunities for all kinds of flexibility. Our intent all along has been to bring a lot of natural light into the building. And you'll see when we get to the exterior treatment of the building how we've done that. We're using clear story glass, which is actually windows, but they're up high on the roof. The circulation desk at the very center of the building is backed up by the area in green, which is the administrative area. You'll see workstations and open space for some future expansion, offices and workstations along the east side, an employee break room down in the lower right-hand corner, right next to the outdoor storage room, which is being removed because of our expansion to the north. The two larger blue areas on the north side of the building, on either side of that major hallway, are the adult book stack areas. We have the hope in this project that because of the expansion, we will not have to have book stacks that are very high, so that people won't have trouble reaching up to find or look at a book. This will also help in the in the monitoring of where people are at in the building, and you'll be able to see to the outside walls from the circulation desk. Up in the upper left-hand corner, in kind of the olive green color, is the Dakota room. And as you know, the Dakota room is a very important room with some valuable books and artifacts, and it will be adjacent to the adult area. The area directly to the south of that, below that, in kind of the, I don't know, what color is it? Kind of a, it's a what?
Community room.
I know that's, I'm trying to think of the color. Violet, okay. That's the community room. It's a fuchsia, yeah, light fuchsia. It's a rectangular room that is divisible in half. So from the front lobby, after hours or on times when the library might not be open, you'll be able to use that room, accessing it from the front lobby. And of course, directly to the south of the front lobby are the new restrooms. So that strip of space from the Dakota room, community room, lobby, and restrooms, the community room could be accessed after hours. by locking that second or third set of doors that you see there. Directly to the adjacent to the restrooms, there's a square area. It's called non-print area, and that's the area where the DVDs and videotapes and CDs and those kinds of items will be displayed. And it's no accident that it's directly beside the circulation counter, because that's an area where they want to have a lot of supervision. The area to the south of that, which is in the southwest corner of the building, is the children's area, where children's book stacks, seating, and space will be. And that little space in the far southwest corner is the office of the person who is in charge of that space. Going directly across the hall then to the east, there's another space that's red for children, and it's the Storytime room. As you probably know, right now, the community room and Storytime room are the same room in the existing library. And that just is not very workable with all of the storage and the activities and the mess that occurs with the Storytime room. They will now have their own space in an area that's going to be behind doors and quiet, where they can do their thing. They'll have plenty of glass to the outside, and they'll have their own kind of a family restroom right adjacent to them. As I mentioned before, the other purple color is the mechanical room directly above the Storytime room. That's the existing mechanical room, which we are going to reuse. We do intend to have a new mechanical system, heating and ventilating and air conditioning system in the building. We may end up with some rooftop penthouses, if you will, that will house new equipment so that we can zone the various parts of the building and bring it up to date in terms of its efficiency. The teal green square room is the computer lab, basically a room surrounded by glass, direct supervision from the circulation desk, direct access from the north-south hallway, and access from inside the office area. And the only other space that I haven't mentioned is the kind of the brown rectangular room near the east entrance, and that's the young adult activity and stack area. They'll have seating, tables and chairs and stacks, and also the staff person in charge of that area will be in that area. The existing building is a little over 15,000 square feet. The addition is about 17,000 square feet. So we're going to have a little over 32,000 square foot facility here. We've discussed a number of detailed things that we will be exploring in the next phase, which we call design development and construction documents. Our goal, if this is approved, would be to have bidding documents ready by the end of the year for bidding in February or March. Good time to bid because of people wanting to set the year right after the first of the year and get a good project to bid on. Before I go into the exterior treatment of the building, are there any questions about the site plan or the floor plan or anything else you can think of? Good.
Do you have a handout for us with this on?
Yes, I do.
All right.
This is a kind of an aerial view, perspective view of what we see the library looking like. This is from the southwest. Brune Avenue goes to your right. You can see the parking on the street there that's existing. I don't think the grass is quite that green, but it's close. So you can see the west wall of the library. Actually, that's the existing wall, except for the one bay on the very end, or the one closest to you. And that whole one bay, or 22 feet, is being added on all the way across the south side. And then you can see the entrance area on the west and going to the east. And what we did was we took those main thoroughfares and we created what we call clear story glass up high that brings natural light in. And as you get closer to the center of the building, the glass gets taller. And as you get out to the outside walls, the glass gets shorter. So our goal was to bring as much natural light as we can within reason and within economics to the center part of the building and create a very inviting, attractive space on the inside. And while doing that, we think that this concept is helping bring the library in terms of its visual presence on the site into the 21st century and generates more of a cutting-edge image that we think libraries and media centers should carry. You'll also notice that we're sticking with the brick that's on the building. We will try to match that brick and use it throughout the project. And you can see also that the glass, the windows on the exterior walls is up high. We're thinking that our glass would be from 7 feet up to about 10 feet where we want it into the stack areas so that we can use those exterior walls for book stacks, displays, and other types of things. Where we want to bring the glass down so that you can look out the window, at the column areas, you can see in some areas we've done that. You can see, for instance, just to the right or to the south of the main entrance, there is no glass, and that's because that's where the restrooms are. So we also are showing you can see some boxes on the roof. Our thinking preliminarily is that we will have some areas that we will put some mechanical equipment on, especially to generate various zones and be more efficient. Some areas of the building may be asking for heat, while other areas of the building are asking for cooling. And fortunately now with our new systems, we can do that, and we can be very efficient. One of the staff or library board members asked at a meeting a week or two ago about daylighting and how that affects the building. And daylighting is in a space like this is just absolutely wonderful and very desirable, where you can bring natural light in and you don't have to have as much artificial light on. You know, the library is in use predominantly during the day, and so if we can bring daylighting in using efficient windows, we think that this can be a very efficient building and one that will serve the community well into the future. So I will pass these handouts out to you and then entertain any questions. I do have a cost estimate, which is probably the most exciting part of this presentation. Demolition of the existing building. Right now, what we're doing is on a square foot basis, we're looking at what we think the costs are. When we get to the next phase, a month or two down the road, we will have a lot more information on the mechanical, electrical, lighting, site utility information, and we're going to do an estimate based on that, very detailed, probably 3 or 4 pages long. Right now it's based on square foot costs. $10 a square foot for the existing demolition, $152,000. Remodeling in the existing building at $60 a square foot, $912,000. New construction, 17,000 square feet at $120 a square foot, just over $2 million. Site work of $100,000. We, at this point, are carrying a contingency of 10%. Our fees were previously negotiated at $192,660 for a total of $3.7 million. At this point in time, with the information that we have, knowing what we know, this is what we feel is going to be close. So, any questions on anything? Michael,
I do have a question. I know on the north side of the existing facility, there's a storage shed, garage with snow blowers and lawnmowers and that kind of thing. What happens to all of that equipment?
That goes into the room in the very low bottom right-hand corner of the building. That's a our outdoor storage area. It's actually, yeah, right there. Actually within the actual envelope of the building.
I've got two questions. One is with the design of all the glass and everything on the columns up above. Knowing our nice warm winters that we have up here, what effect does all of that have on heating?
Well, we all know that glass doesn't carry the same, as high of a R value as walls do. However, offsetting the daylight that glass brings in, and especially in the wintertime with the sun being down low and penetrating the building further, we think, and we will have our engineers actually tell us what the operating costs are going to be and what the payback or the opposite of that would be. But our intent is to use very energy efficient glass, which is the low E coatings and the tint and argon gas filled glass panels. I think that the benefits of the natural light will outweigh the additional costs for energy consumption.
Then my second question would be in relation to the overall cost. When we add in the furnitures, fixtures, and equipment, we're still going to be in the overall budget range that we've been talking about.
Brad, I'll answer that one. The figures that Mark has given us based upon the project budget that we have, his figures fall right in the range that matches our budget. So I don't see a problem with that.
Has this gone through the Finance Committee, this plan? Have you been to Finance Committee?
No.
No. Okay.
As I mentioned before, the next step would be for us to begin more detailed drawings. Simultaneous to that, we would have one of our interior designers come up and spend some time with the department heads and at the building and work out furniture plans and layouts and casework drawings and so on and so forth. There's a lot of things involved in a library that you can make life a lot easier for everyone, including the patron, by good design. I think what we've done in our planning has provided nice open space that is visible from the circulation desk and is flexible, and now we need to make it really, really work.
And the plan is to continue operation during this construction?
Good question. That was originally the plan. What our discussions originally were to build the new additions first, without tearing down the exterior walls in all areas, move the library into the new addition to the north, and operate it out of there while the existing building was being renovated. We're pursuing some avenues on. Perhaps one might be to have a bid option on the bid form when the contractors bid on it, to say deduct the amount that City of Watertown will save if we actually move out of the library and give you the building free and clear. It might also say something to the effect of, how much time will that save us? Because it's all a matter of dollars and time, and if it saves a sufficient amount of dollars and time so that it makes sense to move somewhere, and if there is a space available, then that would make sense. If it doesn't, it certainly wouldn't. We've done projects like this before, many projects where it's owner occupied during construction. It's not fun, and it takes a lot of work, but it can be done. So we're looking into that. It's a good question.
Any other further discussion?
I really like the design, very
Thank you.
attractive.
We do too. It was a team effort, I'll tell you. Got a good staff over there at that library.
Do you need an endorsement from us tonight to move ahead?
We,
Go ahead.
I believe he said that we need an endorsement to move on to phase 2. Is that correct?
Yes.
Mike? So with that standing, I'd like to have a motion to move to phase 2 of the library construction.
So move.
Second.
Moved by Mrs. Walters, seconded by Mr. Wilson. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tracy will speak to us on the next issue.
Thank you. The firm of William Neal and Company PC has just earlier this summer completed the audit of the city for the 2004 fiscal year. You do have on your desk a copy of that report. That it does include the auditor's report. Troy Heeb of William Neal and Company PC is here tonight to review the results of the audit and answer any questions that council members might have. I will say that Troy met with the mayor and I earlier this afternoon and reviewed the report. Would we spend an hour or so going over the various questions that the mayor had and so forth? But with that, I'll turn it over to Troy.
I'll try not to take a lot of time. I guess if you would turn to the schedule of current findings and question costs, which is page 143. This summarizes our results and also any compliance findings or other findings that we had. We issued an unqualified opinion on the financial statements and also on compliance with the requirements applicable to major programs, which is it was a clean opinion. The major program that we had to test compliance on was the non-point source implementation grant, which is a Section 319 program, which would be a watershed program and also the Terry Redland Water Institute. There was one reportable condition of material weakness that we disclosed, and it was because of the Housing and Redevelopment Commission's lack of segregation of duties. And it's discussed more in Part C as finding number 2004-01. We also had a non-compliance finding, which was also due to the Housing and Redevelopment Commission for not legally establishing the retirement plan with the South Dakota retirement system before establishing their own plan. And that is discussed below also in Part C as finding 2004-02. Visiting with the mayor today, he probably thought I should address the Housing and Redevelopment Commission as being a component unit of the city of Watertown. The commission is a legally separate entity, but because the city appoints the governing board, and the commission is not fiscally dependent, which means the commission can't issue any bonded debt without coming to you first for approval. Because of that, we are required to disclose it in the financial statements as a discretely presented component unit. If you go to page 29 and 30 and 31, to the statement of net assets and the statement of activities, you will see the Housing and Redevelopment Commission financial information as a separate column, and that is explains like their financial information. The audit was done by a separate accounting firm, so we just include that information in our report. And since they had these findings, we are required to also disclose them. They have nothing to do with the city of Watertown. It's just the commission. The report has been approved by the South Dakota Department of Legislative Audit, and it was submitted to the Government Finance Officers Association, the GFOA, for their Certificate of Achievement program. The city has received the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting for the 22 consecutive years. Are there any questions that you may have or comments?
We had a very good report, and compliment Tracy for his good bookkeeping. If not, I'll need a motion to accept the finding of the presentation of the audit report.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Garnos, seconded by Mr. Giselbeck. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you very much.
Thanks. I had told the mayor today if you had any questions, you could just give me a call, and if any of you do, I'd be welcome to answer any questions. Thanks.
Thank you. Next item will be a first reading of an ordinance. Tracy will address that. There will be no action required.
Thank you. Yes, ordinance 05-07 deals with removing exemptions from the municipal sales tax. And as you can see, the ordinance strikes language from Title 16, Section 0103. Those items that are listed in that section of our city ordinance are presently exempt from the city's municipal sales tax. They are, however, subject to the state sales tax. And this ordinance will, as it's indicated in there, effective January 1st of 2006, remove the exemption so that these items will then become subject to the city sales tax as well as the state sales tax. State law requires us and all other cities in South Dakota to make this change to sales tax ordinances effective January 1st of 2006. The state law requiring the repeal of these exemptions was actually passed by the legislature back in 2002, and the implementation was simply delayed until 2006. This law was passed as part of the streamlining of the sales tax effort that South Dakota and many other states across the country have been working on in really in an effort to eventually collect sales taxes, state and local sales taxes that are due on sales that occur through mail order outfits or that take place over the internet. So this is really just part of that overall effort and will remove those particular exemptions that currently relate only to the city sales tax. The Finance Committee has reviewed this, and it does come with a recommendation. As the mayor mentioned, this is first reading, so no action is necessary tonight, but I would certainly try to answer any questions you might have. Okay, if not, should I move on to the next one?
Move on to the next one.
Okay. The agenda item number 11 is first reading of an ordinance as well. This ordinance 05-08 relates to the establishment of the number of liquor licenses and fees to be charged for those particular licenses in Watertown. Before I really explain what this ordinance does, I want to point out that this particular ordinance deals strictly with the types of licenses that are required to sell hard liquor. The on-sale or buy-the-drink type of license, or the off-sale or often referred to as a packaged liquor license. The ordinance does not in any way affect the malt beverage or light wine type of licenses. So that's kind of tells you just exactly what it is we're talking about. The state law, again, requires cities to establish the number of these liquor licenses that the city will be allowed to issue, and also the law also requires us to set the fees within certain parameters. Under the law, we're allowed two different methods. We can make a choice as to which method we use to set the quota for the number of licenses and how we establish those fees. We can either adopt a resolution each year setting the quota and the fees for the following year, or we can adopt an ordinance that will stand from year to year without any further action from the council until the council chooses and is able to change the quota or the fees. So we've got essentially two choices. In past years, the limit on the number of licenses and the amount of fees has been set each year by the council. About this time of the year, we'll have adopted a resolution setting the number of on-sale liquor licenses and the number of off-sale packaged liquor licenses and establishing the fees for those. The Finance Committee has recommended writing these limits into the city ordinance really for a couple of reasons. One, it eliminates the need to bring this back to the council every year for action in the form of a resolution. And second, it makes clear what the city's intentions really are in terms of the regard to issuing more licenses within the city. Now, as a practical matter, even if we wanted to, or if the council chose to, we could not legally issue more on-sale liquor licenses. We are in fact, exceed the quota or the formula based on population that's included in state law. So as a practical matter, I mean, it seems silly to every year set the limit when we really have no flexibility anyway. So to me, it makes sense to put it into the ordinance and just leave it be. The council last year clearly reaffirmed its position that 10 package liquor licenses are enough, at least for the time being. Even though under the population formula in state law we could have more than 10 package licenses issued, we have had 10 for many years, and some of you may recall that last year we had an application that came before the council to actually issue a new license, and the council determined that we would stick to the limit that had been established by the council, and that is 10. The fees that are provided for in this ordinance are the maximum fees currently allowed under the state law, and incidentally, those fees have not changed for many, many years. It's been a decade or two, I think, since the last time the state really allowed any change or increase in the amount of the fees. And again, those are the reasons that the Finance Committee has recommended approval of this ordinance. Again, first reading only, so no action is required. But I would certainly try to answer any questions that you might have.
One of the things, Tracy, that I noticed, this has to do only with renewal, and in the event that a new license were to be issued, would not be prudent to have that in the ordinance to begin with, or?
We certainly could, although I believe if the day comes when the city is ready to issue a new license, we can establish the process to determine the fee at that time. It's rather open-ended. There are certain minimums. We can't charge below a certain amount, but that we could, for instance, some communities will have an auction. If they've grown enough, their population has grown enough to where they can issue another license, they will have a competitive process. You could go through any type of a process similar to that, I believe, to determine the fee for the new license. But I think there would, in my estimation, be enough time to do that when the day comes.
So we'd have to go out and create a new ordinance for a new license.
Well, I think the fee for a new license could be established by resolution. This ordinance really, as you mentioned, just sets the renewal fee.
Any other questions? If not, Tracy, we'll move on to item number 12. Tracy, you'll address us on that.
Thank you. The item number 12 really deals with three separate capital improvement project issues, all of which are before you tonight, requesting funding out of the current fiscal year's budget. The item B, the ice arena for the condenser, and item C, the Veterans Memorial contribution, were requested for funding in the preliminary capital improvement plan that we're going to address later tonight. So if funding is approved for those two items out of the current year's budget, then those would be dropped from the capital improvement plan. The John Small, I believe, is here to make a request for the additional funding for the heat exchanger unit at the Recreation Center. And I will also mention, I guess, that all three of these items have come with the Finance Committee's recommendation to approve the funding. The committee did consider where the money would come from, of course, to pay for these projects, since none of them were included in the original 2005 budget. And there are a couple of projects within our capital improvement fund that will not occur this year. One is was money budgeted for plan development for the property that was acquired by the city north of 3rd Avenue. There's some ponds in that particular area. Mayor Barger had indicated a desire at one point to to have the Park and Rec Board pursue some sort of a development to make improvements to that particular area. That I don't believe that project is going to proceed at this time. In addition, there was a project planned for improvements to Cook Complex that was a jointly funded project, and the Softball Association was not able to raise their share of the money, so that project will not proceed either. So either one of those would be adequate to fund these three requests. John, you want to cover the rec center's request?
Good evening. We've had to replace a water heater exchanger for our pool, indoor pool. The current one, the one that we replaced, is 14 years old, and the life expectancy is usually 10 to 12 years. And we had to replace it. It was $4,100, and it was an item that we did not expect to have to replace it. Otherwise, we would have budgeted for it. And we feel it's a capital improvement because it's part of the system to heat the pool, and it's a long-term piece of equipment. As I mentioned, we should get another 15 years out of the new one. We had to already order one because otherwise we would not have been able to heat our pool this summer. And it took about a 4-week for them to make it. They have to make them by as they are ordered. So I came to the Finance Committee to ask for their recommendation to pay through capital improvements. It's $4,100, and as Tracy mentioned, we did get their approval. So I'm asking the council tonight.
So do we have a motion for approving the heater exchanger, please?
So second.
Moved by Mr. Meisenheimer and seconded by Mr. Wilson. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you, John.
Okay, thank you.
Tracy?
And Roger Adams can address the request relative to the ice arena.
The next two items under number 12, the ice arena condenser is a $21,000 piece of equipment that's a part of the refrigeration system at the ice arena. As Tracy mentioned, we requested in our 2006 capital improvement to replace that. That's a 19-year-old piece of equipment that's been giving us difficulty the last 2 seasons. The reason we asked you to consider it out of surplus 05 funds is we begin the ice season in the fall of one year and complete it in the spring of the next. And so we'd normally want to start up the compressor system this fall, the 1st of October. And so in order to go through this season with a new condenser, we came to Finance Committee and requested the use of some existing funds so that we can get that unit ordered, get it installed by October 1st, so it'll be available for this season. And so that's our request on the ice arena condenser. Questions?
Can we have a motion to approve the ice arena condenser purchase? So moved by Mr. Giselbeck, seconded.
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Arbogast. Any further questions? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, the item C is the Veterans Memorial contribution of $20,000. Again, it was a request that is in our 2006 budget, but because of the willingness of the veterans to begin this process and Mayor Fox's encouragement, I guess we felt that again, with some surplus funds, that maybe we could get started with it early. And the Park and Recreation Board would like to see this happen as well. And with us tonight, we have some representatives from this group. Leroy Anderson, I think, is their spokesperson. And again, they are ready and willing and able to begin raising some funds to go toward this project. And I don't know if Leroy has any thing to add, but he's certainly here to answer questions if you have them.
I guess,
would you like to tell the folks where it's going to be, what it's going to be, what it's for? You have the platform to inform the community.
Originally, the design was based on a site up on 7th Street West and 10th Avenue North. But because of some issues with the floodplain and those types of things, decided that a good location would be at Stokes Thomas Lake City Park out on 90 South Lake Drive, and specifically it would be toward the north end of City Park. And there's so much infrastructure already there, such as parking and restrooms and picnic shelters and picnic tables, that it seemed to make sense, rather than duplicate that at a site without those things, that City Park made a lot of sense. And so the memorial itself, I guess Leroy can tell you more specifically, but the design includes a walk of flags, a granite memorial in which names can be printed on, both from individuals and from corporate sponsors, a lot of gardens, lawn area, benches, sidewalks, that type of thing, and it would be located on the kind of the north end of City Park.
So moved.
So we have a motion by Mr. Garner, seconded by Mr. Heller. Any further questions? If
Yes,
not-
first of all, what veterans is this honoring? What war?
It's all veterans. It's
I-
not any
I know,
specific
I
conflict.
would like for the people to know what we're doing out there. How much area it's going to take at the park?
This is for all veterans, whether, if your father was in the Civil War, I'm sorry, Second World War.
Thank you for that. That'll get you a long ways.
Oh boy, let me start over. If
You got your money for sure now.
Korea, never lived in South Dakota, doesn't make a difference where they're from, what war they were in, what service they were in. It's a memorial to honor every veteran there is. We won't discriminate against you for being a woman either.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And how much area is this taking up at the park?
It takes up, the monument itself is 130, it's in a pie shape. I don't have the artist's conception with me. It's in a pie shape. The wall itself, there's 3 walls. They're 26, two walls are 26 foot, and one's 24 foot with a walkway between them. They're 5 foot tall, they're black granite. Names on both sides. The granite, there'll be a gray cap and a gray base granite also, and various other items that I wish I had the artist's conception, because it's really it's very nicely done. We've had an architect from Tucson, Arizona, drew up the original plan, and he can't be here to participate, so he turned it over to Pope Todd, architect in Watertown. He's going to be the gopher, the overall overseer of the park, or the monument itself, to make sure we get the right dimensions, right everything in it.
Leroy, would you explain to the folks how you're going to go about raising funds?
Yes, sir. There'll be each veteran will have a 3-inch by 8-inch space on the wall, and we're going to charge $100 per name. There's room for 680 names on it, which is $268,000 will be raised on the potential. That's without any more donations besides initial one tonight to get it started. So we got a potential for a lot of money, which will be, if I get cooperation with the rest of the Veterans Organization, we hope to pour back into the park itself and upgrade restrooms, parking area, or not parking area, but they're already there, very nicely done. But
thank you.
Okay. Anything else?
Roger Adams and I met with Leroy a couple Saturdays ago out at City Park, and Leroy had painted it all out as to the location and how the dimensions were going to be, and when you looked at it from that standpoint, and it was somewhat of a shaded area that's going to be comfortable in the summertime, even with the extreme heat. The parking was bounded on both sides. It was very easily accessible. I know, like for Mrs. Jungers and other people that need to access park areas with a wheelchair and that, it's going to be very simple as far as accessing the memorial from a wheelchair and that, because of the parking being so accessible, and other facilities that are going to be very easily walked to in that. I just think it's a wonderful thing that we can have a memorial like this, and I really don't know how many other towns even have something like this. Do you, Leroy? Are there many other?
Potter County has one, there's a few other.
Yeah.
Brookings has one, Sioux Falls.
Yeah.
They've got a $6 million one in Sioux Falls.
Yeah. So I think this is going to be just a wonderful addition to our city park, and it's going to encourage a lot of attendance. So, any other discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Next, we'll have the adoption of the 2005 update to the capital improvement plan. Tracy?
Thank you. Before we move to the adoption of the plan, there are some changes to the plan that we have made, some that are recommended to the council by the Finance Committee, and then a couple of other smaller ones that I'd like to address with the council before we, and have the council approve before we move to the adoption of the final plan. Several weeks ago, each of you would have received an electronic copy of the proposed capital improvement plan that was recommended by the mayor. And you'll recall that 2 weeks ago when we met in the middle of July and took public input on the plan, that there were a few changes that the council approved at that time. And I guess I'd refer you now to the sheet in your agenda packet that kind of recaps the changes that the council made on July 13th, or July 18th rather. The proposed CIP at that time was a total for the four-year period was $42,477,173. That was the estimated total cost over the 4-year time frame. At the meeting on July 18th, again, the council made several changes, adding additional money for the Uptown Revitalization Project, $5,000 to as a contribution to the sporting facility study, and $25,000 for the City Hall facade restoration. Since that time, the Finance Committee did meet and considered several other possible changes to the plan. Two of those you just dealt with, the Veterans Memorial Project and the Ice Arena Condenser, and you'll see those on that worksheet as deductions from the total plan. As I explained, if those are funded from the 2005 budget as you have just approved, then they no longer need to be in the plan for next year. The Finance Committee did discuss the improvements that were brought up at the July 18th meeting, at their committee meeting relative to the Derby Downs Arena. I included a separate memo to the in your agenda packet that kind of relayed to you the information on what the committee was recommending as far as a total project to include in the plan of $125,000 with a split proposed with the city paying 80% of that, or $100,000, and the users of the facility raising through their own efforts at $25,000 toward that effort. So that, as a first consideration or item to consider, I would recommend that you make a decision on the proposed changes for the Derby Downs Arena, and of course the Finance Committee has recommended it as it's explained in that memo.
So I guess we will entertain a motion for the approval of the recommended approval by the Derby Downs area arena improvements at an 80-20 split. Can we have a motion for that, please?
If I could just interrupt you for just a minute. We had the people from the Mayor's Committee on Disabilities last time that appeared before us. Was there any discussion about putting something in the budget for making City Hall handicapped accessible?
There was not at the committee discussion, but there has been since that time, and I don't know if you want to talk about that, discuss that now, or address it after we.
I would like to before we vote on the plan.
The motion and the second at this point are not for the entire plan. It's just for the one item relative to Derby Downs, but we can certainly discuss any issues first.
We can vote on that first.
Okay.
That's okay.
I make a motion.
Okay, motion by Mr. Giselbeck, seconded?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Garnos. Any further discussion?
Yes, I'd like to discuss that, and I'd like to have Roger Adams please come up to the microphone and indicate to the council what the Park and Rec board has recommended considering this arena improvement?
Well, as the council's aware, the Derby Downs was under the airport and was turned over to the Park and Rec Board, I believe last fall. And so this is the first year we've gone through a budget process with Derby Downs. The most pending capital improvement item that we felt was the replacing the septic sewer system with a sewer system that's tied into the city system. And we requested those $55,000 in funding because that's an obvious requirement because of the location of Derby Downs in relation to the public sewer. So that was in our budget request. And then based on the July 18th meeting when the discussion come up on other improvements, specifically arena renovation, and then later going to the Finance Committee, the issue, I guess, that concerned the Park and Rec Board was when we've partnered with private entities for improvements to our facilities, the traditional cost share has been a 50-50 situation, whether it's been for the recent concession restroom building at Foundation Fields, in which junior teener baseball came up with half the funds, or most all of our zoo projects with the Lake Area Zoo Society have been a 50-50. Also, our projects with the Hockey Association, the Soccer Association. So we'd kind of established that precedent of bringing projects to the council at budget time that were 50-50. And so the only concern from the board was that, you know, do we send a message that now the cost share has changed to 80-20, or is this a unique situation that justifies that cost share? So that was the only issue that I think Councilman Heller wanted to make the council aware of.
Well, that, Roger, and I thank you for doing that, but Roger and I and met with the people who are trying to get that arena renovated, and we all understand that there's some need to have that arena renovated. It's in really tough shape. The problem is they really are non-professional, if you want to use that word. They really have no idea where the money is going to come from. Now, if there's some people from the rodeo association that want to come and talk, I'd welcome that. But I have some concern, not only on the council but as a member of the Park and Rec Board, that if we set a precedent of 20% by doing this, that we're going to run into all kinds of problems down the road. And I'd like to hear from the rodeo people and see what they have to say about that percentage.
I'd like to add one thing, and I think this is a unique situation. When we built Foundation Fields, we didn't require them to put up 50% of the money to build the ball diamonds, did we?
No, we had grant funding and some private funds, but
Right.
it wasn't a 50-50
Right.
deal.
I guess my issue here is I believe, number one, it's a safety issue. Number two, we probably should have fixed it before we turned it over to you, and then we wouldn't have this issue. This really, to me, is a safety issue. I mean, we all know that arena's in tough shape, and you've got horses and riders under full speed operating, and I think we as a city have the responsibility to have as safe of an arena as possible, and that's why I've been pushing this. I think this is a totally separate, issue from some of the others, and so I would say, yeah, it is a unique issue, and we're not setting a precedent unless you can demonstrate you've got a safety-related issue.
I guess I can see the point that George makes and the rest of the Park and Rec Board. I think we should stay with the policy we've established. I'm not quite sure why it got to the 11th hour before we heard anything about the safety factor that now seems to be the utmost importance. What about last year, the year before, or the year before? Nobody's ever been up here at budget hearings or anything to tell us that was getting in such bad shape. I mean, that's something that's very specific to the people that use it. And I really don't think we should start setting a different precedent than we've already established. The folks, the Soccer Association folks, Zoological Association folks have worked very, very hard to improve those facilities, and I think we need to honor that by staying with the program that we're on.
Well, what happened out there, they did have a pretty good base and a pretty good field, and then somebody went in and dug it all up with a digger and mixed the clay and the gravel and everything together, and that's what ruined the whole thing.
Well, who's somebody?
I don't know. I had no idea. I would like, as a member of the Finance Committee, I'd like to respond to what George was asking. This request came to the Finance Committee, and unbeknownst to us, or at least to me, was the 50-50 responsibilities that the Park and Rec Board had accepted. But I certainly agree with Brad, the importance of doing this, because it hasn't been done in years past is all the more reason why it needs to be done now. Well, now we do, and now we need to take action on that, is my feeling.
Well, I understand where you're coming from, but the way I understand it, they're not going to be able to do any construction out there until next fall anyway.
In this fall.
And a year from now, because they won't be able, they don't want to do any construction during the rodeo season, and I understand that. They're talking about some volunteer labor, and that'd be wonderful, and I think that could go towards their contribution some way or other. But if you talk about safety, my goodness, that's been out there for 20 years, and if I can't think of anything more unsafe than riding a bull, and I don't care what kind of ground you're riding it on.
Falling off the bull is
or racing around a barrel at full speed on a horse. I can't think of anything more unsafe than that. And animals slip. You see it on television. You see it all over the place. And I think that the safety issue is well and good, but it's something that at this point I don't think we have to concern ourselves with.
Well, also, it's not just the rodeo people that are going to be using this. They're not then that are using it now. 4-H, for example, the number of horse shows that are out there almost on a weekly basis, on a weekend basis, this is important to all of these groups, and we can't just say it's just rodeo group. It's several groups.
No, I didn't mean to just say rodeo groups in the 4-H groups and whatever. I apologize to them if I misspoke.
I also think it's important to note that, part of what we're trying to do in Watertown is create top-line facilities. I mean, to make our community competitive with other communities around this state. We've done an event center. We've done a library. We're doing a library. We're doing a swimming pool. I mean, these are things that we're looking to improve in our community for the betterment of the community. We have the financial resources to do this, and it's a needed project that's going to benefit a lot of people. It's going to bring sales tax revenue into this community. It's going to fill up hotel rooms. Those are the types of things that are all within our goals, and I think we shouldn't miss an opportunity to do something that's right.
I would just make you aware that the project estimate for the first phase for the arena renovation was $125,000, meaning that at the 80-20, the groups out there that use the facility would need to come up with 25, and they have currently a commitment from the Watertown Community Foundation of 17 of that 25. So they don't feel any issues with generating the other 7,000 or 8,000 to get to their 25. And as someone mentioned, they've always been a group willing to volunteer some sweat equity into it. What percentage points that adds up to, we don't know, but we know that they're more than willing to provide some labor for the removal of the existing arena and some of those things as well.
Mrs. Bonas, did you wish to address this?
Just be available if you had any additional questions.
Oh, okay.
I'd like to ask Mr. Heller what the Park and Rec Board's vote, what was the Park Board vote on this?
Well, their recommendation is that, that they stick with a 50% donation. And if the city council wants to go against that recommendation, that's fine and dandy. I don't know why we have a Park and Rec Board if we're going to do all this other stuff independently.
Well, and I believe the Park and Rec Board just wanted to make the council aware that it isn't in line with what they've done in the past with other groups, so that if the precedent is set and we get hit with an 80-20 recommended partnership, that you understand that maybe the precedent was set with this project. But I mean, the Park and Rec Board would like to see the arena improved. We want a safe facility just like everybody else does. I think it's all a matter of if the funds are available to do it. It's a good project.
I agree with George. I'm on the Finance Committee, and the July 18th council, things sometimes just go right over your head, and you have a very good department, and we kind of accidentally slighted you on this. I agree with George that it should be a 50-50 match. And part of their 50 can be in labor.
The trouble is that they're kind of, there's a rodeo association and there's the horse shows and there's different issues, and who's going to contribute that much? I mean, in other words, the rodeo association, if you're going to figure on them raising $50,000, they're going to say, hey, we'll go to New Underwood, we'll go to Brookings, we'll be inside in Brookings, we'll go to Sioux Falls. I mean, they're not going to put $50,000 down, with that. Now coming up with 10,000, that's a different deal, because you'll have some local horse associations that can help raise money, everything else, but $50,000 is a lot of money.
Roger, how can you get a handle on that organization?
Well, what's been created is a Derby Downs Advisory Committee made up of 6 members, 1 member from each of the 6 organizations that utilize the facility, whether it's the 4-H rodeo, the horse show, the handy riders, the saddle club. We've got 1 rep from each of those 6 groups on an advisory committee. And I mean, we would go back to them and say, whatever the dollar amount is that needs to come from the private groups, here's your goal, and as a group you need to accomplish it. I don't know that any one horse show or one rodeo is going to have to raise X number of dollars. It's got to be a group effort.
So this group hasn't met yet? You haven't met with that new governing board?
No, each group has appointed a representative on the committee, and based on decisions tonight, they'll have their first meeting shortly.
It would appear to me that maybe the meeting should have been before tonight.
No, I could step in. Last fall, when you said that you hadn't heard of this before, and in fact about a year ago at this time I had, once the 4-H rodeo was completed in the second weekend of July 2004, seeing the needs that needed to be met out there, I had approached the mayor's office and said, what can we do? Who do we talk to? What are the proper steps to take? And at the time, of course, your budget process is in motion. The current Derby Downs committee that was, appointed by the mayor, hadn't met for 4 to 5 years, is what I had heard. Obviously, there was a lack of interest there. So the people that were on it were no longer involved in events out there. So I suppose the need to meet was, not there. I took it upon myself to contact the members of that committee and say, are you still interested? Can we meet? Can we talk? Do something? We have a plan we'd like to talk to you about. We did meet. And not much was accomplished, because at the point of the budget for the 2005 was in process, and at that point we couldn't do anything. So in September, when the Vision 2015 meetings came about for the different wards, I went to one of the meetings, got it on the ballot, it got the vote, and from there we formed this committee through the Vision 2015. The committee met many times throughout the winter. We voted on, we had a couple different plans, we measured, we laser leveled the arena. There's a lot of discussion as to what the pros and cons of which way to do what out there as far as the layout. And ultimately, I think it was in March, the plan was voted on and approved. And then on April 12th, we gave our presentation at the Vision 2015. Well, it was here, I guess. And that was our process in a nutshell.
Well, did Roger meet with that group when you were meeting during the winter?
Well, at that time, it was being turned over to them.
It wasn't a Park and Rec facility.
But you didn't have anybody from the Park and Rec on that advisory committee?
No, it was all the local horse enthusiasts, different people from these committees.
Larry, I think at that time, the transfer to the Park and Rec hadn't been, at least it hadn't been announced, even though it may have taken place.
No, I understand that, but the city has always been kind of involved in a third-hand way, right?
The Derby Downs was under the airport, basically, for all the other years, so that's the involvement. And Loretta's talking about the Vision 2015 committee, which met during that process. It's different than the advisory committee that's currently in place.
I just have one other short comment. This $125,000, the way I understand it, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is just a kind of a guesstimate, and it does not include any architects or engineering fees. And you know, it may end up to be a lot larger project than $125,000.
I think the way it was discussed in the Finance Committee was up to $125,000.
We're prepared to do fundraisers. We just haven't done any of that yet because we haven't had the okay. It would look a little foolish if we went out and fundraised and it wasn't okayed. So, but that's our plans.
Well, we had a very nice meeting about that, and we understand each other, I think, don't we?
There's a certain amount of revenue raised at each of these events. What is that used for?
Well, it depends on the event and the 4-H and the high school rodeo. Of course, you have personnel you have to pay. You have to pay announcers, you have to pay stock contractors, you have to pay insurance and things like that. Entry fees goes towards the purchase of awards for the youth that participate in the rodeos. Not a lot over and above, but the local horse shows, I guess I can speak on behalf of a lot of these groups because I'm involved in 4 of the 6. So the local horse shows, we charge a minimal fee for each event that a person enters that is then turned back into the prizes that are awarded at our awards banquet at the end of the year.
Isn't there part of that goes towards the cost of maintenance and so forth on that?
At this time, there's not a charge that I'm aware of. There's a charge for the building use.
I think when they've made money at any of these events, they've stuck it back into the facility, even though, I mean, they bought different, I think a squeeze chute that they spent money on, and so they don't make a lot of money on the events, but some of what they've made has gone back into improvements. Other than that, the city budget's about $3,000 annually for utilities and about $1,000 for maintenance. And as you were aware earlier, we already run that budget dry when we had the electrical issues that you gave us some extra money to fix.
Yes, ma'am.
Roger. Okay. I'm Kathy Monens, and I'm on the 4-H Rodeo Board. And the money that we do, if we do have a profit, is usually stuck back into the arena. For instance, like Roger mentioned, the round tub. Both of our contractors for the 4-H Rodeo and the high school rodeo had told us that they would not be able to attend our rodeos with their stock because of the safety reasons of the fencing of the loading of the chutes that were out there. So between the two committees, I believe the crowding tub was around $3,000 that we have invested and put back out there. Last year, the speaker system quit. Our group went ahead and purchased $2,000 towards a new speaker system that we now use out there. And along with the rest of the items that we have, costs for the stock initially is a huge chunk of our funds that we do raise, along with the awards that we present to the contestants that come. Also, we put back into the community. All of our contestants that come usually either stay at the rodeo grounds or here in Watertown in your motels. Now, I don't know if you realize how many people this involves, because our rodeo has 284 contestants each day. So that means 284 families basically that come into the city of Watertown for the weekend. Now, when you talk about how many motel rooms and gas stations and restaurants, Thunder Road is a huge income maker for them on that weekend, on those weekends when the rodeo's in town. So we'd just like to tell you our support, and what we have put into it has come out of our pockets.
Thank you, Mrs.
You're
Barnes.
welcome.
Hey, Roger. If we decided to go on the 50-50 basis and they weren't able to come up with the money, what will we do with the facility?
Well, as long as it can be still operated safely and that their insurance, they can get their insurance for their events, I assume we'll continue like we have for many years before we took it over. But, I mean, they do have to secure insurance for their events, and I mean, if there's some point in time where the facility is determined to be unsafe by the insurance carrier, then they won't provide that coverage anymore.
My suggestion to these folks was that we put this off for a year so that they get a chance to go out and raise some money and come back to the Park and Rec Board and present their plan to the Park and Rec Board and let the Park and Rec Board make their recommendation at that time. I don't think another year is going to make that much difference, and I think it would benefit all parties if we just would put this off for a year and deal with it next year at budget time.
I think there are a couple more phases to the project as well that they've got, and protocol being protocol, I understand that, but what I don't understand is that when we have a project that needs to be done, we have the resources to do that project, why would we put it off? We've got other projects down the road. If they want to complete those projects, then let's tell them, you got to raise money for the next project, and you've got to raise 50% or better. I just, to me, this is, I went out there on with Roger on a very rainy day, and that arena was terrible. And we have a lot of rainy days when you have events and other things, and I think it looks bad for Watertown. I think we'd be missing an opportunity if we don't proceed and get this one off the books and move on to the next part of it.
Well, the biggest argument against that is that you end up with an unfinished project if they can't raise the money.
The rodeo people said that if you're not going to fix it up, this is just on the restaurant. They said, hey, we're not coming back to Watertown. It's just that bad this spring when they were here at the rodeo.
If this were to occur, Roger, when could you rectify that problem out there? Are we, in the wrong season, the wrong time now? Are we behind the ball again?
Well, our discussions out there Friday was that, hopefully if the project's approved, our funds aren't available till January 1st, obviously, and that's not construction season in South Dakota. But the hope was that with their portion of the money, they could begin the plans and the design, and they've got a lot of that done, but actually get it in in contract documents that they could go for bid so that they could bid it, in February or March. We don't know whether they'd want to tear into it in the spring, but maybe it would be a year from about now when the season is is toward the end, and that there would be enough construction time to make the renovation happen. I guess I personally question whether you could start it in the spring and get it done in the spring before all of the activities start out there. So I would say it would be in August of '06 is when the actual work would start. So it is something that if it's going to be funded, it's appropriate to do it in the '06 budget.
We've had a,
Do we have a motion?
yes, I believe
What
we
is
had a
it?
motion, didn't we?
What is
Motion
the
and a
motion?
second.
Could you repeat
to,
the motion, please?
Would you repeat the motion, please, Tracy, for us?
The motion was to approve the recommendation of the Finance Committee to provide for an 80-20 split on a $125,000 project.
Still, the only problem I have with that is our Park and Rec Board. And if we, the Park and Rec Board are the ones that send us a recommendation. Those people have done their homework. They've known about the project. We just heard about the project. I certainly think the project needs to be done, and if we can make some concessions with these folks on it, but I still hate going against what the Park and Rec Board has recommended.
Is there some way you can approve that amount of money with the blessing of goes back to the Park and Rec Board? So, I mean, none of us around here that I know of are rodeo experts or dirt experts or those kinds of things. I mean, we're all kind of like talking here.
I don't
and-
even know a horse.
Right. So is there a way that amount of money can be approved, or will it fit into next year's budget, Tracy, so that those people know that we're actually making a commitment to the rodeo grounds and not just saying, oh, we'll put them off for another year and come back later and hope the problem goes away?
Stan, will we have to have an amendment to that, or to that motion to this, or how would that be done? Well, Larry wants this money reverted back, and there is nothing in the, in here, it just says arena improvements 80-20 split.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out a reasonable solution to the problem so that everybody's kind of happy and nobody's totally upset. So I don't know.
Dream on, Larry.
So I don't know exactly how to say that or how to do it or if it can be done, but that's what I'm attempting to accomplish here, and I don't know exactly
And I
how
think
to do it.
that's what I'm thinking too, that I'd like to do, because there's certain, I want to see the facility go unsafe. We certainly don't want to lose the rodeo folks, but yet at the same time, I don't want to go against one of our own boards either, and after they've had the opportunity to look at it more closely.
No, I don't think you'd be going against the board. The board wants to get the improvements done. The problem is, if you let the rodeo or the horse association or whatever only contribute 20%, then you're setting a precedent down the road for the other associations. And what's going to do is you're going to end up, if the hockey association or somebody wants to come in and ask for an improvement, they're going to come back to us and say, yeah, we're not going to do that 50%. We're only going to do 20%. Maybe I can make a substitute motion. Maybe I can I make a substitute motion? All right, my motion would be that we split the 125, 70%, 30%, and I'll make that motion. 125,000, 70, 30.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by
This is like a let's make a deal.
motion by Mr. Heller and seconded by Mr. Johnson to go with the 70-30 split, with the money that if they don't come up with their share of the money would be reverted back to the Park and Rec. So, any further discussion?
We got a lady up there who likes this.
Well, I just, as a sort of a shirt tail relative to the rodeo, I'm Beth Manty from the Chamber of Commerce, by the way, because with the Convention and Visitors Bureau as part of our budget, we do support the rodeo in a lot of our promotional efforts and things like that, and it is part of our budget. I have just a couple comments. One is Mr. Giselbeck is right in terms of some of the feedback that we've gotten in terms of the quality of the rodeo grounds. Second being that as a city council, as you worry about precedents, you also have that power to, and I understand about wanting to support all of your different boards and committees, and I have like about 4,000 bosses, as the chamber director, but that's where your power comes in as a council, is to consider that there are special circumstances in every single thing that you do. And I think that this group right now is bearing the brunt of some inactivity of their predecessors in terms of not bringing it to your attention that there were a lot of problems at the rodeo grounds. Another comment that I have to make is, as I've been reviewing the project Vision 2015 as preparation for our strategic planning, there is a lot of information in there as to regards to the safety of the rodeo grounds. And of course, all of you have been aware of the Vision 2015 project. So not to be critical, but it does surprise me a little bit that I'm hearing a lot of comments about it's only recently been brought to my attention. We all heard that earlier this year in the Vision 2015 that those rodeo grounds have been needing improvement in a very significant way. So I just wanted to add some of those comments, and from a Convention and Visitors Bureau perspective, those rodeo, horse show, as some of them alluded to, and 4-H dollars that come into our community are significant. So if we lose the high school rodeo to some of those other communities that have put significant money into their rodeo grounds, it's going to fall into the same category as we are with the sports situations now, where we're going to start to be bypassed by some of the other communities by the 4-H and the High School Rodeo Association when they look to pick their rodeo grounds for their events, because we have a lot of competition out there for that state high school rodeo association. So, and I've been a volunteer out there for many years judging different events, and I've seen people fall and slip. And yes, you're right, they fall and slip in other events too, but we're getting to the point where we're gonna lose a kid sometime out there. And I agree with Mr. Johnson that if we've got the resources, I think now's the time that we need to address the issues out there. Thank you.
I think with the George's offer of a compromise and a liberal interpretation of in-kind labor, which is what we do with the Upper Big Sioux program, and that we can get this project accomplished. And that would still, I mean, we had said up to 100,000 from the city on a 70, or on an 80-20. I would assume that meant up to 100,000 on a 70-30 basis. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know where the 125 is.
Well, the 125 would be in the budget total for the, so it probably should be reflected a little bit differently, but.
Mr. Meisenheimer has a question. Call the question. We vote. Okay. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. And I believe it's for a 70-30 split. Is that correct, Tracy?
That's what I understood.
That's what I understood,
I'm not
too.
sure what the total project is, but
It was
the split was
125,000 with a 70-30 split.
Well, the math doesn't quite work out. If the city's contribution is $100,000, I can figure it from there. But
Right. Okay.
It'll be a little larger than a little smaller than a 125,000.
I think originally it was up to 100,000.
Right.
Right.
Of city money, yep.
Okay. Moving on. The next two items on the sheet that we started on, as I mentioned, you've already dealt with the Veterans Memorial Project and the Ice Arena Condenser. The other changes that I'd like you to consider tonight, the City Hall facade restoration. Following our meeting on July 18th, I did receive a price estimate from a firm that does that kind of work, and they indicated to me that $5,000 should be more than adequate to do what we are intending to do to the City Hall building. So I have programmed that $5,000 into the City Hall maintenance budget for this year. Since it's at that level, it's really not a capital item anyway. So the sheet indicates that $25,000 would be removed from the capital improvement plan. Now it has been suggested that perhaps we should leave the $20,000 in there for other improvements necessary at City Hall, particularly for accessibility issues. Now that, I guess that's certainly up to the council to make that.
That was my recommendation, that we leave that 20,000 in, and then we begin studying to determine exactly what, if we were to put a new elevator in the building, what exactly, where it would go, so we would have intelligent answers to the question.
Why change now?
Is that a motion, Brad? Yes. That's a motion and a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Wilson. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you, and there are two other small changes to the proposed plan. The one is listed on the sheet there, a $2,500 reduction in the amount requested for a phone system at the sewer department, and there was another small item for $1,400 that was in the plan for some furniture for the network administrator. He has kind of shook the bushes a little bit and was able to obtain his furniture without cost to the city, so we'll give him credit for that, but there's no need to budget for that stuff then next year. So that'll be a $1,400 reduction.
So do you need a motion from us, Tracy?
Yeah, I would like you to approve those two minor changes unless there are others. But
So moved by Mr. Giselbeck, seconded?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Mrs. Walder. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
thank you, and unless there are other changes to come from the council or from the folks here, I think with those changes, then we are at a point where we can consider the plan as it's been amended.
Thank you, Tracy. Dave, you were going to speak to us? A consideration of the contract change orders.
We just need to adopt the
Oh,
overall.
I'm sorry, we need adoption of the final
Thank you.
plan.
I'd make a motion to adopt the overall capital improvement plan.
And I'll second it.
Okay, motion by Mr. Johnson, seconded by Mrs. York to adopt the final plan. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I believe we've got room for Dave. It's getting long.
Good evening. The next item on the agenda is approval of a change order for McLaughlin and Schultz for the 2005 street, alley, and parking lot improvement project. This is a change order, a reduction of $152.30. It is adjustment of the quantities on the schedule of the project that deals with the Jackson Park improvements. And this comes to you with the recommendation of the Public Works Committee for approval.
Okay, we'll have our contract change order number A. We need a motion for that approval.
So move.
So moved by Mrs. Walder, seconded.
Second.
Second by Mr. Johnson. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Shane?
Good evening, Council. Mayor Fox. In your packets, this is you should have change order number 3 handouts for the North Maple Storm Sewer Project. As you can see, the contractor brought in a final quantity of pit run material and removed additional wet clay from our trench. The biggest item on this change order is a decrease of $3,800 for 2 water service replacements that didn't need replacing because they were deeper than was anticipated. I would look forward to a motion to approve change order number 3 for a total decrease of $3,020, and this comes with approval from Public Works.
Always pleasure to vote for a decrease. Also
Would-
move.
All right, I believe Mr. Solberg made that motion first, Mr. Garnos. You want to second it then? Second it. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
As an update, we will be putting the final lift of asphalt on Maple tomorrow morning.
Okay, Dave?
The next item on the agenda is a change order for McLaughlin and Schultz for the Pheasant Ridge Industrial Park project that included the sewer mains and the construction of 43rd Street East. This is for an increase of $26,829.88. This is for adjustment of the final quantities on the project. There was some additional work that was done in a few places. Some additional riprap added in some ditches at some culverts to stabilize those areas. An additional approach that was put in for access to one farm property along the project, and some additional gravel that was used on the north end of the project where we tied back into the county road to stabilize that area. That the road wasn't in very good shape to begin with, and the construction activities tore it up pretty good, so we had to put extra gravel on that. Those were the main items of adjustment under this change order. And this comes to you with the recommendation of the Public Works Committee for approval.
Have a motion for that approval?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Wilson, seconded.
I'll do that.
Seconded by Mr. Johnson. Any further discussion?
Gordy didn't want to.
No. Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Tracy, item number 15.
15 and counting. The next item is a proposed accounts receivable policy and procedures. This has been reviewed by Finance Committee and does come with their recommendation. I will just say that many of these procedures have been followed for some time in the Finance Department. We have not in the past reduced those procedures and policies to writing, which this will do. And it also, in some respects, tightens up our procedures in terms of collecting on delinquent accounts. It sets out a little bit more deliberate process so that we are consistent in how we handle those instances. If there are no questions, I would ask for your approval.
We have the approval on the accounts receivable policy and procedures.
So move.
So, motion by Mrs. Waldron and seconded by Mr. Solberg. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Good. Motion carried.
Thank you. Next item is the renewal of our employee group life insurance plan through MetLife. They have given us a proposal for no rate increase, and they have also indicated that if we choose, we can lock that rate in for a period of 3 years, which is what I would recommend that we do. Any questions?
We have a
at all?
motion then to for the.
I'll make a motion for that.
Okay, a motion by Mr. Giselbeck, seconded.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Johnson. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Next we have Eric on the item number 17.
Hey, good evening. I got two things here, and my nose is running, kind of bleeding, so I'll make it kind of quick. We have a landing fee agreement to talk about for Midwest Aviation. Over the last couple months, we've been talking to Midwest Aviation to try to get a landing fee agreement with them. As you recall, a couple months ago, we had a landing fee agreement set up with Business Aviation out at the airport, and this is the same terms, same agreement, basically, with a different air cargo operator out at the airport. So we're just trying to make the playing field level out there, and I would ask for the approval for the mayor and the finance officer to sign that agreement.
May I have a motion for that, please?
So move.
So moved by Mrs. York, seconded. Seconded by Mr. Solberg. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, item number B, which is the lease agreement for the GSA for the Transportation Security Administration lease space. Basically, what happened is the TSA's lease had expired a couple months ago. They went out for a re-extension on that lease, and during that extension, we set up basically a new lease they'd increase their lease space to 265 square feet, and as they did that, their price per square foot would also increase about 3% every year for the 2 years of the lease period. That would bring their total lease period for the first year at $13,140, and then for the second year, $13,392. They pay roughly about $1,000 a month now compared to what they will pay $1,000 a month basically compared to the $465 or so they pay now. So we get paid a pretty good chunk of change from them being in the airport terminal, and it's good that they're there. So I would authorize or suggest the mayor and the finance officer also agree with that lease. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I'd like a motion to go ahead and sign that lease agreement.
So
moved by Mr. Heller, seconded. Seconded by Mr. Meisenheimer. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you very much.
Next, we'll need a motion to approve the bills and payroll as presented and authorized payment.
So moved.
So moved by Mr. Johnson, seconded. Seconded by Mrs. Arbogast. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Next, we're on the open, and I believe that, is there anyone to speak to the open? I guess it doesn't look like it. So under old business, appointment of department heads. I'd like your approval to go ahead and appoint the department heads as they currently stand. If I can have a motion for that, please.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Heller, seconded.
Second.
By Mr. Meisenheimer. Any discussion? I guess if not, all in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Next on the appointment of council committee boards and commissions, I'm going to pull the utility appointment for the next meeting. So that will be one that will not be part of this approval. And so could I have a motion to approve the council committees, boards, and commissions that I gave to you? So moved by Mr. Johnson.
I'll second it.
Second by Mrs. York. Any discussion?
That's other than municipal one.
That's correct, Tuffy. All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Any other old business to come before the council? If not, under new business, Herb, were you going to report on our trip to Pierre?
I am, Mayor, and thank you, Mayor, and members of the council. I think probably many of you read in Friday's public opinion where the city of Watertown received an announcement from Senators Johnson and Thune that the city had or is in the process of receiving funds from the transportation bill that's being worked on at the federal level to support a couple of our upcoming transportation projects in the city, those being the Southern Connector route and the realignment, reconstruction work of the intersection at Highways 81 and 212, respectively $3.6 and $2.5 million for those two projects, which, in all honesty, is great news for the city of Watertown. And timing of the announcement couldn't have come at a better time. Members of Focus Watertown in the city were scheduled last Friday to meet with the Secretary of Transportation and other representatives from DOT out in Pierre to discuss not only those two projects, but the rest of the projects that we have on the State Transportation Improvement Plan, those being the Northern Connector route, or as some people would know it called, the Northern Bypass, the First Avenue North Extension project from 19th Street East to 29th Street East at 212, and the reconstruction of Highway 81 from Highway 212 north to C Avenue up by Gas and Goodies. We spent a good 2.5 hours with the Secretary of Transportation and her staff talking about these projects. The purpose of the meeting was to determine, based on our economic development and growth and needs, whether or not there was going to be a need for reprioritization of any of the projects that we have on the state transportation plan. Had a very productive meeting, and we're able to come to basically a mutual agreement between the city of Watertown and the DOT on how we should proceed with all these projects. It always helps when you've got $6.1 million to throw into the kitty when you're talking, with state agencies. And so, what we were able to tentatively do was to establish the following priorities or reprioritization of those projects. And the good news is we lost nothing but gained a whole bunch. And so, honestly, it's a win-win-win for the city of Watertown and this part of South Dakota. The priorities that we laid out, and we'll summarize these in writing back to the Secretary of Transportation this week, are as follows. We'll authorize the DOT to continue to proceed with current plans for land acquisition and getting ready for construction of the Northern Connector route to begin basically next spring, in the spring of 2006, with Phase 1 and be completed with the completion of Phase 2 in the fall of 2007. Also direct the DOT to add the Southern Connector route to the State Transportation Plan, which it isn't on the list right now, and that's why we went to Pierre, in all honesty. Do that immediately so that we can get the DOT staff to begin the planning process yet this year. The goal with the Southern Connector route is to complete Phase 1, and Phase 1 is the section of road from South Broadway basically east along 20th Avenue south to 29th Street East and then back up to 212. That's phase one, and then the complete in 2008 is the goal to have that section completed and then complete the second phase, which is from Broadway west or northwest to Highway 20 to be completed in 2009. The the First Avenue North Extension project will stay on the list as currently scheduled for 2007, understanding that's a city project, city-driven project, and the reason it's on the state's list is because they do, in fact, through federal urban systems money, provide part of the funding for that project. And lastly, because of the availability of additional funds, the improvements for the Highway 212 north to C Avenue North, as well as the intersection realignment at 212 and 81, with additional funding, we're able to move those projects up to 2008 from where they were currently listed as 2009. So this is good news, understanding that certainly the ability to finalize this priority list is contingent on the federal transportation bill being passed by the House and the Senate and signed by the President, which from the sounds of things is very likely at this point. And I guess what I'd tell you is if the City Council agrees with the priorities that I've laid in front of you, then we'll continue to proceed in terms of getting the letter put together and sent off to the Secretary of Transportation this week. I would certainly recommend that to the City Council, and I'd hope with your blessing we could go ahead and do that. So if you're so inclined to do a motion, it would be in order at this point in time, just so that we can continue to move forward. With that, I'll be glad to entertain any questions, although, as I recall early from listening to Mr. Foley, maybe this isn't the appropriate time. But
this is what I was going to ask Stan. Stan, is this appropriate or not?
I don't want to minimize Herb's suggestion. Vince made the comment about declaring the magpie the city bird or whatever, but I think that if all that the council would be doing is simply affirming what Herb has laid out, that he's heard from the feds at that level and the state with the DOT meetings, if it's just an endorsement of that plan and the city participation in it, I don't see that as official action.
I'll make a motion we endorse the plan as laid out by Herb.
Thank you. Motion by Mrs. York.
I second endorsement.
Seconded by Mr. Giselbeck. Any questions? Any discussion?
I would just add to, one of the bottom lines of this whole thing is between Thursday and Friday, we went from zero funding for the southern bypass to $8.6 million. And it was not on the state transportation plan, and now it will be, and the money between the federal government and the state is to be committed to us, and I think it was just one great day for Watertown.
And I would have to concur with that. I'll tell you the opportunities that are going to be available that once we have the southern bypass and the northern bypass completed, especially the southern bypass, is going to allow us to expand our railroad that we've invested quite a sizable amount of money on and really open up the southern area there for some industrial development. It's almost unbelievable to think that what's going to be facing us here in the next 5 years once this is all completed. So with that, any further discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Any liaison member reports? If not, we will not have an executive session. And I'd like to have a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Garno, seconded by Mr. Meisenheimer. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you all. We adjourn till the next time we meet, 2 weeks.